Chapter 3. Don't worry. Know what? Real close to here on one of the planets of Sirius there are some violet-colored beaches. They're incredible. If you could only see a twilight with those two gigantic suns, do you travel at the speed of light? He thought my question was funny. If I traveled that slow I would have been an old man by the time I got here. What speed do you travel then? We don't usually travel, it's more like we situate ourselves. What? We situate ourselves by simply appearing at the place we want to go. Instantaneously. Well, we do have to wait a while. The instruments on board have to carry out complex calculations, but from one side of a galaxy to the other would take. He picked up the calculator hanging on his belt and punched in some numbers. According to your measurements of time, an hour and a half. And from one galaxy to another would take several hours. Well, how do you do it? Can you explain to a baby why 2 and 2 make 4? No, I replied. I don't even know the answer to that myself. Well, I can't explain things about the space-time contraction and curvature, either. And there's no need to. Check out how those little birds glide over the sand. They look like they're skating. How wonderful! Amy was watching some birds running across the beach in a group. They were pecking at some food that the waves had deposited on the sand. I suddenly realized that it was late. I have to go, I said. My grandma, she's still asleep. But I'm worried. Worried? How silly. Why? Don't live your life imagining problems that haven't yet arisen and aren't going to. Enjoy the present. You have to live life to the fullest, always seeking happiness instead of worrying. When a real problem arises, then put your time to good use figuring out how to solve it, instead of worrying when everything is just cool, like now. I think you're right, but, do you think it would be worthwhile for us to stand here worrying that a gigantic wave might come along and wash us away? It would be silly not to enjoy this moment, this beautiful night. Look at those birds running along without a worry in the world. Why should we waste this moment thinking about something that doesn't exist? But my grandma does exist. Yes, she does. And she's not having any problems. Doesn't this moment exist for you? But I'm worried. Oh, Earthling. Fine. Let's see your grandma. He picked up his television set and began to push the buttons. A picture of the road leading to my house appeared. Images of the trees and rocks along the path passed across the screen. Everything was in color and all lit up as if it were daytime. We passed through the wall of the house and there was my grandma. She was sleeping deeply in her bed. You could even hear her breathing. That was one amazing device. She's sleeping like a little angel, commented Amy with a laugh. Is that a movie? I asked. No. This is live and direct. Let's go into the dining room. The image passed through the bedroom wall and the dining room appeared. There was the table and the tablecloth with the big checks, and at the place where I usually sat my grandma had left the plate with my dinner, covered by a second plate turned upside down. That looks like a UFO, he joked. Let's see what you have for dinner. He adjusted something on the TV set and the plate on top became as transparent as glass. A piece of beefsteak, some French fries and a tomato salad appeared. Yuck! Amy exclaimed with disgust. How can you people eat cadavers? Cadavers. Cow cadavers. Dead cow. A piece of dead cow. The way he was talking about it made me feel disgusted, too. How does this TV set work? Where's the camera? I asked him, very intrigued. It doesn't need a camera. This gadget focuses, selects, filters, amplifies and projects. Simple, isn't it? He seemed to be making fun of me. How come it looks like daytime when it's really night? There are other lights that your eye can't see. This apparatus picks them up. How complicated? Not at all. I built this rattle trap myself. Yourself? It's really out of date, but I love it. It's a souvenir, a homework assignment from primary school. You guys are a bunch of geniuses. Not at all. Do you know how to multiply? Of course, I replied. Then you're a genius, to someone who doesn't. It's all a question of degree. A flashlight is a miracle to an aborigine living in the rainforest. You're right. Do you think that someday here on Earth we'll be able to have inventions like yours? For the first time he looked serious. Gazing at me with what seemed to be sadness, he said, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? You know everything. Not everything. No one can see the future, luckily. Why did you say luckily? Just imagine. Life would have no meaning if we could see into the future. Would you like to know the final score of the game you're watching before it ends? No. That makes me mad. That's no fun at all, I replied. Do you like to hear a joke that you already know? I hate that, too. That's boring. Would you like to know what you're going to get for your birthday ahead of time? That's the worst of all. The surprise is completely spoiled. I liked his way of teaching, the way he offered clear examples. Life would lose all meaning if the future were known ahead of time. You can only figure the possibilities. What do you mean? For example, you can figure the Earth's possibilities or probabilities of saving itself. Saving itself. Saving itself from what? From what? Haven't you ever heard about the contamination, the wars, the bombs? Oh, yes. Are you trying to tell me that we're in danger here, too, like in the bad guys' worlds? The possibilities are here. The relationship between science and love on your planet is very skewed toward the science side. Millions of civilizations like this one have self-destructed for this very reason. Your planet is at a critical point in its evolution. These are delicate moments, dangerous times. He was scaring me. I had never thought seriously about the possibility of a third world war or another catastrophe like that. I thought hard for a long time. Suddenly I had a marvelous idea, one that could solve all the world's problems. You guys could do something. Like what? I don't know. Arrive in 1,000 spaceships and tell the presidents not to make war. Something like that. Amy smiled. If we did something like that, in the first place, there would be thousands of heart attacks, caused by all those movies about space invaders that portray us as if we were evil demons. And we're not inhumane, you know. We couldn't bring about something like that. In the second place, if, for example, we were to say to them, transform your weapons into work tools, they would think that it was an extraterrestrial disarmament plan to make them weak, a trick so that we could dominate the planet. Third, let's suppose that they were able to understand that we're harmless, they still wouldn't give up their weapons. Why not? Because they would still be afraid of the other countries. Who's going to be the first to disarm? But they have to trust. The children trust, the adults don't. Especially those who lead nations. And they're right, because some people have the desire to dominate everything that they can. I was feeling real uneasy. I kept trying to think of a solution to prevent the war and save humanity. After I'd thought for a long time, the only thing that occurred to me was that the extraterrestrials could take power on Earth by force, destroy our weapons and oblige us to live in peace. That's all. A few frightened old ladies having heart attacks would be nothing compared to what would be saved. I told him this. When he had stopped laughing, he assured me that I couldn't stop thinking like an earthling. Why? By force destroy oblige. This is all earthling talk. To us it's prehistoric. Human liberty is something sacred, both ours and that of others. Because of this, oblige does not exist in our worlds. Each person is valuable and respected. By force and destroy is violence, a word that comes from violate, and our spirit is completely opposed to this. And finally, we can't and don't want to cause anyone's death. Even if you think that a few heart attacks aren't important, then your people don't make war. I hadn't even finished saying this before I felt stupid for asking. He looked at me affectionately and putting his hand on my shoulder, said, "We don't make war because we love God." His answer really surprised me. I believed in God, a little, but I had been taught to feel more fear than affection for him. Besides, lately was I beginning to have doubts. I was starting to think that only religious people believed in God, them and people who aren't very cultured, because I have an uncle who is a nuclear physicist in the university and he says that intelligence killed God. Your uncle is foolish, Amy asserted after perceiving my thoughts. I don't think so. He's considered one of the most intelligent men in the country. He's foolish, Amy insisted. Can an apple kill the apple tree? Can a wave kill the ocean? I thought that you were wrong. God exists. I started thinking about God, a little repentant that I had doubted his existence. Listen. Take off that white beard and tunic. Amy was laughing because he had seen my mental images. Then. He doesn't have a beard. God shaves. My space friend was delighted by my confusion. That's an Earth-style God, he commented. Why? Come on, let's go for a walk. We began walking on the path that led to town. He put his arm across my shoulder. At that moment I felt that he was the brother I never had. Some nocturnal birds squawked in the distance. Amy appeared to be delighted by those sounds. He breathed in the sea air and said, "God doesn't have a human appearance." His face was shining in the night while he talked about the Creator. He doesn't have any form at all. He's not a person like you or I. He's an infinite being. Pure creative intelligence, pure love, I exclaimed. The way he had said this was so beautiful that it moved me. That's why the universe is lovely and good. It's marvelous. I thought about the inhabitants of the primitive worlds that he had mentioned and also about the bad people on this planet. What about all the bad people? They'll be good people someday. It would have been better for them to have been born good from the very start. That way there'd be no evil anywhere. If you don't know evil, how are you going to be able to enjoy goodness? How would you be able to appreciate it? Asked Amy. I don't understand what you mean. Don't you think it's beautiful that you're able to see? I don't know. I never thought about it. I guess so. If you had been born blind and suddenly could see, then your sense of sight would seem marvelous to you. Oh, yes. It's the same with those who have lived difficult, violent existences. When they overcome their difficulties and attain a life that's more humane, they appreciate it more than anyone. It's a little boring to be an angel for eternity. But, on the other hand, it's beautiful to advance, to overcome adversity, to learn. If it were never night, we couldn't enjoy the dawn, we were walking along the pathway that was illuminated by moonlight and bordered by trees. We passed my house. I went inside quietly to look for a sweater. On the table I saw my plate, covered and waiting for me. I felt powerful because, even without removing the second plate on top of it, I already knew what was on it. But then I started to have doubts, and I peeked under the top plate to make sure. Yes, it looked exactly as it had on my friend's little TV set, but I still wasn't hungry. I returned to Amy's side and we continued walking and talking. We still hadn't reached the first streets in town and couldn't see the street lights yet. He was contemplating everything while he was talking. "Do you know what you're doing?" he asked me unexpectedly. "Know what?" "You're walking." "You can walk?" "Oh, yes. Of course. And what's so surprising about that?" "There are those who have been invalids and, after months or even years of rehabilitation exercises, they are able to walk again. For them the ability to walk is really extraordinary, and they're thankful for it. They enjoy it. You, on the other hand, walk around all the time without paying it the least bit of attention, without thinking that you're doing anything special." "You're right, Amy. You're telling me so many new things."